and welcome to Film Independent Presents, Virtual Edition. I'm Rachel Bleemer, Director of Events for Film Independent. Before we get started today with a very exciting Q&A, I have to give some love to our partners, starting with the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. Thank you so much for your dedicated support through all of these years. Secondly, I have to thank Vision Media, our trustee platform, and getting our members all of these great films. And we also want to give a special thank you to MTV Documentaries, the film distributor for today, and supporting us and supporting great films like this. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our moderator for today, Renee Tajima Pena. Please take it from here.
Hi, thanks so much, Rachel. Thank you, Film Independent. And I'm really excited to do this. One, because it's just a really powerful film. Also because I'm a Chicago native and I'm with my people here today. Jenny Shi, the director of the film, Brent Huffman, one of the producers, and Diane Quon, one of the producers. Also, I feel like I'm a part of the Kartemquin family. And so this is really terrific to be amongst Kartemquiners. So let's just move right into questions. I know everybody in the audience must, have lots of questions. So I'll start with Jenny. Can you tell us why you wanted to tell this story? So, finding Ying Ying could have really been your standard, a co-ed gets raped and murdered kind of mystery. But you made it something much more layered and deeper. So can you talk about why you wanted to tell the story, and also your position as an insider? You were a fellow Chinese international student at U of I as a Chinese American woman. I mean, did that make a difference to the way you approached the film?
Yeah, I would say, I didn't really start the film or approach the story as a journalist. And I think that was the biggest differences. So for me, the first time I heard about Ying's disappearance was the summer of 2017, I think just 2 or 3 days right after she disappeared. So I was really worried about her safety just as a fellow Chinese student studying in the US. And I found out that Ying and we went to the same university in China. So I was just like anyone else, posting her information on my social media and just try to see, what we could do to help find her. And I think that was like a week after her disappearance. Her family actually came to the US to search on their own. And I also learned that there are a lot of Chinese students supporting the family, and the local residents. They were taking care of the family on a daily basis since they knew nothing about the country, about the language, and about culture. And for me, I was actually studying at Northwestern University, and I was taking Brent class, a documentary journalism class. So I learned how to use cameras to tell stories. So for me, I was just thinking, maybe I could do something, using my own camera to create something useful and helpful for the family. So I went to visit the family and also met a volunteer whose name is Shiling Sun. He was a student at U of I. And we just came up the idea of why not start documenting things, what's going on. And I did get a sense that the family, they were afraid that, like right now, there are a lot of media attention, but how about weeks or months later, will people still pay attention to them? And they thought, our idea about capturing their journey was actually good for them. So that's how I started, get to involve in the story itself. But again, to be honest, I didn't really think about making a feature-length film at the very beginning. It's more from the family's perspective, I would say, what we could do to help them. And I think that made a really big difference from, an investigation piece or like 2 hours investigation documentary. That's the biggest difference, because like my motive, behind the film was very different.
And you were an insider also. So, you're very familiar culturally and with that community. And do you think that made a difference also in terms of your relationship with the family, with the other people supporting her, or and even just understanding her story?
Of course, because for Ying's parents, again, they came from Chinese culture, and that was the first time they went abroad, and as a volunteer, I would say, like visiting the family on a weekly basis. On a weekly base, I saw other like reporters interview the family, and what I observed was like the mother, sometimes she just broke down when American reporters interviewing her. And the father, he was always sort of like stoic, and he always talk about they won't give up until they find Ying Ying. And in the final product, in the news coverage, it's always like 10-second sound bites. And for me, I spent a lot of time with them, and the family, they got really close to me and got familiar with the camera, and they were more comfortable express their emotions and the real thoughts that won't really see, in the media during that time. And from my perspective, this is not just a story about a Chinese girl who was killed in the US. It's not about a true crime story, just like you said. It's more about the family's experience and who Ying Ying was and how much her life has touched others. And, I came from a similar, cultural background, and I have studied in the US. For me, it's a perfect, I would say, when we talk about who's the right person to tell the story and Ying's, story, I just feel like I have so much, skills and cultural background to bring a full picture of the story. And that's really important.
So for Diane and Brent, if you can rewind to the moment that you first found out about Ying Ying's story, can you just describe, your reaction and what moved you to become a part of this project?
Brent, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So like Jenny mentioned, I was her professor. So I'm a professor at Northwestern. I'm a documentary filmmaker whose work centers on China. So I'm automatically really interested in kind of the bigger picture stuff. But when Jenny, so this started as a class project, and when I had Jenny as a student, I was so impressed by the levels of trust that she got with the family, and just the way she really wanted to tell this kind of compassionate, humanizing, personal story, both of Ying Ying's family, her parents, and the boyfriend coming to the U.S. for the first time, and kind of discovering U.S. culture at the worst time of their life, and this kind of personal, this really sort of beautiful, personal, humanizing story of Ying Ying, and the way that I think Jenny really wanted to, almost bring her back to life in the film. I also have a young daughter, so a lot. I think there's a lot here. A lot of this felt very kind of personal and important. I wanted to be involved.
And I came on in 2018, so a year after the crime happened. Jenny is part of Contemplative Films, as you mentioned, and she is part of the Diverse Voices in Doc Fellowship program, which is a program Contemplative has to encourage first-time filmmakers of color. And that's how I met Bing. Bing was also a fellow at Contemplative in the same way. And so Jenny had a screening of like her 25-minute student version that Brent talked about that they did in class, and she invited me to Contemplative to see it. And I really was so impressed by the way she was telling the story. I am not a true crime fan, so actually I hadn't heard about the whole crime, even though it's a year later, because I'm the type of person that turns that off on the news. It's just not something that is something that I desire to watch. So to watch the film and see Jenny's a vision of the film and her perspective and her desire to, as Brent said, to humanize the victim versus glorify the perpetrator in the crime really meant a lot to me, to see she wanted to tell the story in a different way, much like you, Renee, telling your stories about Vincent Shane. You know, it's not about the crime. You have to talk about it. It really is about the people left behind, including Ying Ying, the victim. The other thing I was really impressed with Jenny at that screening. The contemporary work in progress screenings are really tough. People like
Mhm.
throw all these hard questions to you. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? Or don't you think of this? Why don't you think of this? And Jenny, I mean, she's so young, but she was just so composed, and you can see clearly like why she wants to make this film. And so a couple months later, she asked me to produce, and I really wanted to work with Diane and Brent to make this happen.
So Brent, you mentioned that Jenny bringing Ying Ying alive. So can you talk, Jenny, about, when your central character has passed? I mean, that's a real challenge. And you, as a filmmaker, you can go the route of this, this ghost that kind of populates the film and populates the story, or, making that character somehow very present as a living character. And how did you grapple with that? Just finding your approach. What did you want Ying Ying to be on screen for the audience?
Yeah, so for me, I definitely want Ying to be an active presence in the film. But to be honest, at the very beginning, I wasn't really sure how are we going to bring her to life because we didn't have much materials about her. But during the process of making Finding Ying Ying, we actually figured out that she kept diaries when she was in the US and even before she came to the US. And that was during a press conference 2 months after Ying's disappearance, when the family, I mean, the parent, the mother and the brother arrived. And during that press conference, Ying's boyfriend, he read the last line of the last diary entry Ying put down before she disappeared. That was, "Life is too short to be ordinary." And that was the first time I really feel like I got to know Ying Ying, and I found a window to get to know more about her. So we talked to the family about whether we can, utilize the film and somehow to weave it into the film, when we are documenting the family's journey to seek justice and to find Ying Ying. The family, they were reluctant at the very beginning, and we were also very cautious about how we ask them about those personal belongings, because these are things that very private, very personal, and we didn't want to, ask for something that we didn't even know what exactly we are going to use them. So it was in 2018, a year after Ying's disappearance, and during that time, Ying's parents and Ying's boyfriend, they already went back to China. So I visited them, and that was the first time I got to see Ying's personal belongings, her bedrooms, her books, and I got to see a lot of her childhood photos. And I figured out that she actually had some home videos. And that was the time I realized we actually can really, push for a narrative about, really about who Ying was, and can really bring her alive creatively. So in post-production, we have a great editor, John Fa brother. He and I, we work together to figure out how we are going to use these materials. And eventually we decided to have me reading Ying's diaries and really bring the audience to Ying's world. So in the film, at the very beginning, we basically have like several minutes just about Ying's diary. We wanted to set up Ying Ying as a character, a vivid character, in the film at the very beginning, before you even get into the crime. And that's the approach. And also that's our vision, throughout the whole process.
So on your visit to China, the footage is remarkable. The footage with the parents, with the family. For people often evoke grief, but this was really the day-to-day impact of grief and what it did in terms of tearing the family apart. Were you filming that, and or did you have a camera person, or were you shooting? You were shooting. Was
Yeah,
that a budgetary question, or was it because, you know, you felt that you had that relationship and you're the one that they trusted?
I would say both. But
Okay.
I think it's very important. Yeah, I think it's just very important for me to keep, you know, the relationship with the family. And this is a very sensitive story. And the family, they were comfortable with me being there. So we try to limit the crew. We are not going to bring in strangers, you know, they never met. If we hire someone else and let them to, you know, let the cinematographer to film with the family, the dynamic between the, you know, participants of the film and the filmmaker would be very different. So that's a major reason why, you know, I'm the cinematographer, I'm filming with the family. And you know, specifically talking about the shoot in China, I have an additional camera person being there with me. She's very nice, so we both, you know, work together on the shoot in China. We both have cameras. So for the family, you know, we spent a lot of time in the US together. They got familiar with me, and after they went back to China, they were actually even more open to the camera, because in the US they try to behave themselves. They didn't know, you know, whether they're, you know, what they said would, you know, jeopardize anything. So when they were in China, they were actually even more open about their thoughts. So in the film, you really, you know, get a sense of the anger, you know, from the father and the frustration from the family when they were waiting for their trial. And there are specific scenes about, you know, the family conflicts. I would say, like, I was just filming their daily life. I didn't really expect what's gonna happen next. But they were just very comfortable about express their feelings in front of me. And I really cherish the relationship I've, you know, developed with them. And even today, I'm still in touch with them, not just as a filmmaker, but also as someone I really care about them. And I know, you know, again, like I said before, media attention, because the case, you know, Ying disappeared in 2017. It's like 4 years ago, and right now, no one really pay attention to them. And I still get a sense that, you know, the parents, they want listeners to hear their stories. So releasing the film, you know, last year, and keep looking for distribution in China this year would actually help the family to still bring awareness to Ying's story and their story.
So this is a question for the entire team. I mean, you've all mentioned that you wanted to center Ying Ying and her family in the story. But did you have a discussion as a team of, should we try to get the killer on camera? I don't remember his name. I don't even want to say his name, but did you have that discussion?
I'm sorry, I kind of missed that question
Oh,
because it broke up.
just given that in the final, you know, film, you've really centered the family, and that sounds like what Jenny wanted to do. But did you have a discussion about getting the killer on camera at a
To,
certain point?
to interview the killer, I
Yes.
think it's funny because in the beginning we had much more of the crime and him in the film, not necessarily in an interview, but seeing him talk about what he did and talking to the police and the FBI. And the more we had work in progress screenings and showed the film to others, it became more clear that that what really resonated with people, and we were reminded that was we wanted to feature Ying. So we actually cut back on a lot of the crime and a lot of the footage of the perpetrator. And we really intentionally all talked about, like, how do we not give him more agency? You know, how do we not have him on screen as much as possible, even when we're talking about the crime? So, and when we talk about the crime, often it's Jenny describing it versus hearing it in his words, which we did have available. So I don't think we ever talked about having him on. We talked about having Tara, the girlfriend, because she's a much different character. And luckily Jenny, because of her letter to Tara, the ex-girlfriend, she agreed to be in our film. After turning down everybody else, all the other media, she, it just shows how much she was willing to help with the story, with our story, and how she wanted to honor Ying Ying as well.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, even early on, even in the student version, I think Jenny was very much in sort of verite mode with the family, that this was, you know, their story. It wasn't the killer story, and we weren't going to give them, you know, we weren't going to give them sort of time on screen to hear that person speak.
So I was really fascinated with this Tara. What is her story? I mean, what's her deal? Was that really, she just really sincerely wanted to help? Or, I mean, and the relationship with him, is there a backstory to Tara?
Yeah, I would say, you know, before the trial, there were a lot of news coverage on her. And
Oh.
what we learned from her, I mean, what I learned from news coverage was that, you know, she worked with the FBI, and she had, you know, certain relationship with the perpetrator. And I just feel like, you know, everyone has already has like a stereotype on her, even before she spoke to the public, or even before she, present her testimony in the trial. And Shilin and I, we actually sat through the trial like on a daily basis. So we were there every day. We actually saw her, what she said, you know, in the court. And I don't know, I just feel like, you know, really seeing her in the courthouse, the feeling was so different from what I read from news coverage. And on the one hand, she was so crucial, you know, to the whole case. If it not her, you know, secretly recording the conversation with the perpetrator, I don't think the FBI would really arrested that guy and sort of bring justice, you know, to the family. So she was really crucial in terms of, for the law enforcement. But I was always curious about her as a human, and also somehow as a victim, you know, of the whole process. And I think just after her testimony, after that day, I tried to reach out to her. I wrote a letter to her, basically talk about like what I'm doing, what the film gonna about. It's gonna focus on Ying Ying and to celebrate her life. So I give it to the court clerk, and the court clerk actually passed the letter to Tara. And I think that was like a week after that, I got emails from Tara, and then we started communicating with each other through emails. And she was just so thoughtful and caring, just through, you know, reading her language. And she was just so brave. And the more, you know, I talked to her, she started to think about, you know, whether she could meet with the family. She really wanted to show her support to Ying's parents and to Xiaoling. So I talked to the family and found out the family, they actually also wanted to meet Tara. They wanted to thank Tara. So that's how, you know, the meeting was set up. And Tara, you know, I don't know, like I just found out she learned how to read Mandarin in high school. So she really wanted to read a letter, you know, in a language that the family could understand. So I helped her like practice before the meeting, and she just read that, you know, really touching letters. And for me, you know, the scene in the film where the family meet Tara was so powerful. And that's also, you know, part of the humanity behind the whole tragedy.
So has this been shown in China for the whole team? It has. And what's the reaction been there? I mean, there seemed to be, even with the way the family address the system of justice and, you know, the death penalty versus life imprisonment, etc. Like what's been the reaction?
Yeah, so we showed the film at the Guangzhou International Film Festival in December last year. There were 2 screenings, physical screenings. So we only got some feedback from the audience, you know, attended the screenings. Overall, it was positive, and people, you know, resonated with Ying's story so much. And just from the pictures that the volunteers took, you know, from the screening, I saw people like they were crying, and they really got the story. And in terms of, cultural differences and the differences between the, the the Chinese criminal justice system and the US criminal justice systems, there were a lot of conversations around that. Because I would say from the perspective of, many Chinese, they don't really understand why that perpetrator, he didn't get death penalty. And in the film, we are trying to bring up the differences between the two, criminal justice systems and between the two cultures. But we are not really, blaming the US system. From a perspective of a filmmaker, I just want to show the human experience. So in the film, we show how the family, they were frustrated about the whole process because of the cultural differences and language barriers. And on the other hand, we still show the work that the FBI and the police, the FBI and the prosecutors, they've done, and the led audience to see, how cultural differences and how basically led the audience to experience the hardship for a family, searching for their missing daughter and seeking justice for her in a foreign language, in a foreign country.
So for Brent and Diane, I mean, it's releasing this in, I guess, 2020, this very fraught time for US-China relations, the middle of the pandemic, the whole even discussion about international students and Chinese students at US colleges, gender violence. I mean, it's like this perfect storm, and this film in many ways sits in the middle of that storm. So did you have any, in terms of messaging and any impact plans for the film here in terms of US audiences? Is there a campaign, or is it, how are you kind of thinking about that?
You want to talk, Brent?
Sure. I mean, I would start with saying we never imagined the film would come out. It is like this perfect storm of this, pandemic, and then you have, Trump and the GOP blaming China and all this awful racist, rhetoric coming from that administration, and this rise in sort of hate crimes against Asian Americans. My wife, who's Chinese, was confronted in the grocery store, like this, just all this stuff. And I mean, in some ways, it's the perfect time for the film to come out. Like you said, in that it is this film that breaks stereotypes, that celebrates this incredible young woman, celebrates and humanizes her incredible family, a family I wish I had Ying Ying's family, that just his family that would do anything to find her, this incredible boyfriend. So obviously we want audiences to see the film in a big way. We want young people to see the film in a big way. And I think in terms of impact plan, we want to show at universities, show at universities like mine, show at universities like yours, Renee, so that we can, reach students with this incredible story, and hopefully have some impact, hopefully improve some of the situation.
And just expanding on that, one last question, maybe Diane, you can answer, is because of the pandemic, I mean, everything was out the window, right? So how did you pivot in terms of the release of the film?
Yeah, it was, we were supposed to premiere at South by Southwest, which we were so excited when we got the, the notification that we got in, and we literally had plans to go, although probably Jenny was one of the first to bring up what happens if COVID restrictions happen. And I have to say, I kept thinking, nothing, we'll be able to go, but a week before they canceled South by. And then we thought, well, we'll just go to the next festival. But slowly and surely we realized every festival was being canceled, at least the physical screening. So at some point we had to just make the decision, do we just go ahead and virtually show it and get it out so that we can show the film to an audience. I mean, that's why we made the film. So luckily we did start to get into festivals and virtual festivals, and realized this is the way we're going to show it. And then we were so grateful. Sheila Nevins saw the film, and MTV Docs came on board and became our distributor. And they have become so pivotal in helping us get the film out. They helped us support a theatrical release, and has been supportive of whenever we get a request, like we just got a request from another university. It's been, it's hard. We'd rather do it in person, but we're committed to doing it virtually. And then China, yeah, that is, we're still looking for distribution there. So your question about the reaction, I think we're still hoping there will be much more of a reaction in China when we actually find distribution there. I think China, one of the things we were most worried about was how the family would react when they saw the film. And Jenny just really took the time to make sure they saw the film before anyone else saw it. So even before showing it in the US. So that was probably one of the first things we had to figure out was how do we show it to the family before we bring it out in the US in 2020 with COVID. And it was a convoluted way to show it. Jenny was Skyped in and a friend showed it to the family, but they were totally supportive, including those really sensitive scenes that we were all nervous about.
It must have been really difficult for them to watch. So.
And Jenny was there.
Oh.
On
Yeah.
Skype.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yes. Because, I mean, we always wanted to show the film to the family and really being there when they watch the film. And especially a film like this, I just don't think, we just can, I don't think we can just throw a link to them and let them go through the whole process. So like Diane mentioned, I just asked two of my friends in China. They visit the family in person and brought the film on their laptop. And Shirley and I, we Skyped in. So we try to create a sense of, watching the film like real time. On the one hand, we can see their reaction to certain scenes in the film. On the other hand, we are just being there with them. It was tough for them to watch. And Ying's mom, she started crying at the very beginning of the film, even before getting into the crime. And before, showing the film to Ying's mom, we even had a conversation with Ying's father and boyfriend to see whether we are going to show the film to Ying's mother. I was just worried that, it might be too much for her to digest. I don't know how to handle that. But at the end of the day, we just feel like it should be her decision whether she wanted to watch the film. And she decided to watch the film with Ying's father together. So after screening, we talk about, what feedback they had, if there's any scene they don't feel comfortable with, and if there's anything missing they wanted to add into the film. I think the only suggestion they give us was about the civil lawsuits. So at the end of the film, we put up a text card, like an update about the civil lawsuit, because the film, we still want the film to end on Yingying. We don't want it, to go to like some other directions. So we, take the family's, suggestion, but also, made it in a way that still worked for the whole story. So that's how we navigate, the relationship with the family and showing the film with them.
Okay, so we have audience questions. First is from anonymous attendee. Is there any way that the FBI is going to try and find out if the killer killed 12 other people and then use that investigation to go to the trash mine to pull up his victims? It feels like the FBI should be the ones to pay for that.
Yeah, so basically based on our interviews and investigation, the FBI, they did investigate it, sort of like the past victims, but they just couldn't find anything. But again, you can't find that, doesn't mean, that doesn't exist. But in terms of the case, Ying's case, basically that's the end of the investigation on the perpetrator. And in terms of, the trash mine, or like Ying's, at the end of the film, the family lawyer and the prosecutors, they revealed that Ying's remains mine ended up at a private landfill. that's also something cannot be verified. So that's why it is so difficult for the law enforcement to really, go for that landfill and, dig into all the trash and try to figure out where Ying is. Yeah, and it's been such a long time. So the searching process is already extremely difficult and would be very expensive. And for the family themselves, it is very frustrating because when they first came here, they hoped to find Ying very soon. And then they learned that Ying was kidnapped, but they still hope that Ying could come back safely. And then they learned that, Ying she's no longer alive, and they hope to bring her back. And at some point, I remember the father, he even said, even part of her remains. So, but now, they're back home like empty-handed, and there's no real closure, I would say, even with the trial, with a verdict that, the perpetrator got life in prison, but there's no closure in the whole case.
So Gary said that Tara was brave to agree to be with the perpetrator right after the disappearance. Did she talk about making that decision? I think she talked a bit in the film, but about her fear, but did she expand upon that?
Yeah, so Tara, she actually, again, talking about, news media, there are a lot of speculations around that, why she worked with the FBI. Some people, they were guessing that, the FBI forced her to do things, or they paid her, to work with them. But Tara actually told me that she was actually the first person brought up the idea that working with the law enforcement. She wanted to help, and she just feel like, Ying Ying, in the film, she actually said, Ying Ying is someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's girlfriend. And her Tara herself, she's also someone's daughter, someone's sister, and someone's girlfriend. And if it happened to her, she wanted other people to help her. And I think that's one of the reasons why she decided to work with the law enforcement. That's her motive, yeah.
But to realize that he was such a vicious killer, that's an incredible decision to,
Yeah, I think
be
she
speeder.
mentions how she's scared. She was scared. She knew she had to continue to do this to collect enough evidence. I just can't imagine being in that position, continue to be with someone who has committed a crime.
Yeah, to spend any additional minute with him alone.
Mm-hmm.
And to be wired too. He could discover the wire at some point too. Yeah, I think it's just an incredible bravery on her part. And like Jenny mentioned, I think the trial wouldn't have happened without her, without that direct evidence.
So some people had more of the business of filmmaking question. At what time, what stage in the filming did you start to receive funding? So I assume this was you just picked up the camera at first and it's kind of self-funded it?
Yeah, it's funny you said when you asked the question about why you were the camera person, and I agree it's to be more intimate, but it definitely helped with the budget too. And it also definitely helped that Jenny could edit too, so that some of the initial demo reels and all of the 25 minutes Jenny had edited, so that really allowed us to keep moving forward without funding. And then we did get some grants, but mostly small grants. And then luckily we got some, I call them like dream investors, who really believed in the film and became true supporters of the film, not just investing money-wise, but helping in any way possible. To this day, they've been helping us get the word out and supporting us whenever possible. And one of the investors was a Chinese international student, and he helped us set up 2 fundraisers, one in New York and one in Chicago. And that really raised the balance of the funds.
Really?
Because, yeah, and it was amazing. He just, with his help and support, But there were points, and I know Brent and Jen remember this, where we actually said we have one more week
Right. of
for
course.
the editor, or we're going to have to stop. And then luckily we got the one investor come on board, and then slowly more. And Sundance was very supportive of us as well. So we did get some grants, but the fundraising was a huge piece of it, along with the investors.
So somebody else asked, then what kind of camera and audio, well, what kind of camera did you use and what was your setup? Was it like a one-man band kind of shooting? Oh, okay.
And
Yeah.
it was the Northwestern camera. Talk about saving
Oh.
money. It was the Northwestern FS5 at first.
Yeah, so when I started the project, I was doing school, so I just basically borrowed the FS5 from Northwestern, and I mean, it was small, and I think that was the perfect size for a documentary like this. Again, like the family, I think they were like uncomfortable with big cameras and big crew, so we tried to limit the crew, and just me, being with the family, hanging around. And I have Shilin, who is also familiar with the family. I mean, the family also familiar. They were also familiar with him. He has even small camera, Sony A7 III. So that's like a camera, like a B cam. So for the whole like filming process, I think at first, that's a good way to save budget, save money. And later on, I did think about maybe change it to like better cameras. But again, thinking about the situation and the scenes, we are going to capture, and the situation that the family they were, at the moment, we just feel like there's no need to upgrade, all the gears and to try to make it, like a big crew, following the family. So we actually didn't have a sound person like being with us. We just recorded directly through the shotgun on the camera and also the wireless mic. And I think it's just very important to have a great collaboration in the team. So sometimes we actually ran into a lot of unexpected situations that, we were following different characters in the film, but all of a sudden, something happened, and the Shilling and I, we have to kind of split, I'm following like this person and he's following that person in different places, but things are happening at the same time. So that's how we basically work together.
So Kumkum had a question. Do you think the perpetrator would ever speak with you at a later date? I know you want to center Ying Ying in the film, but would you ever interview him? She also says she teaches at UC Santa Barbara, so she would be really happy to help get it shown on campus. And please do get in touch with the public lecture units at universities.
I'm writing that down.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. In terms of the perpetrator, no, actually, I don't really think I would try to get him on camera, even he's like willing to speak to us, because I was just thinking about what's the point of getting his point of view. Because in the film, we've already got a lot of basic facts of what happened to her. And that's already enough for the story I wanted to tell. And I always wanted to say that, this is a film about human experience. Really, it's really about the family's experience. It's not a pure like investigation, even though we have investigation elements. And using the like the secret recordings, and also the surveillance footage, and also the interrogation footage where the law enforcement talked to the perpetrator. That's already enough for the film. I don't know whether he would get a chance to watch the film, but anyways, because this film is to celebrate Ying's life, and I hope after people watch the film, they can walk away with an image of a talented young woman who had a beautiful life, bright future ahead, and really to see how much her life has touched everyone around her. And even today, when you talk about Ying Zhang, for me, as someone being so close to the story for such a long time, the first thing pop up in my mind is her smile. It's not about the heinous crime happened to her. It's more about her, you know, the image of her and her personalities. And it reminded me about all the like the diaries she wrote down, and I myself found inspiration from her story. So I hope, you know, other audience could also have, you know, the same feelings after they watch the film.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end the conversation. We're out of time, but thank you again, Jenny, Brent, and Diane, for making the film and joining us for the discussion today. And best of luck. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to want to see it and should see this film, Finding Ying Ying. Thank you, Film Independent. Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel, Film Independent. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.